Hello guys and welcome to another edition of Rage Against the Dice. Today we're taking a look at Achtung Panzer. Now this, as you can see on the book, is a game of World War II armoured warfare. It's by Warlord Games, which means it's obviously going to be good, unless it's the Doctor Who game, which we still do not speak of, all this time later.
You just spoke of it.
Outside of mentioning the fact that we don't speak of it. Yeah, Project Z was a bit hit or miss, but it was
reasonably fun.
It was a beer and pretzel game. It wasn't a competitive, long-term game. But it was fun when you played it until your zombies all were in a conga line. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So today we're taking a look at this rulebook. Now, Sparks is going to be helping, but at the moment he's also building secret things. So I'm going to take a look through this bad boy, and Sparks is going to chime in with all his major knowledge on the game, since he's actually read this book and I have not. So this has just come out, I believe, Sparks?
Yes, I received my copy, I think 3 days ago.
So you're looking at sort of the middle of April.
Yeah.
Closing in towards the end of April. So when this video goes out, you will know that we did film it new, even if that is going to end up not being the case when it gets uploaded. Because, well, it's me, basically. Yeah, because I'm ridiculous. But yeah, so the main premise of this game, unless I'm mistaken, is it's tanks shooting each other?
Granular tank battles.
Granular tank battles. Now, and this does differ from bolt action tank war.
Yes.
Because it doesn't use the same rule set, essentially.
No, it's drastic. So a tank war is effectively bolt action, but skewed more towards tanks. This, like I say, it's a granular tank war. It goes into one of your actions is to start loading the gun, and another one of your actions is to finish loading the gun.
Yes. So this, as I said, is the rulebook itself. Now, you can buy this on its own. I believe you can buy a PDF version of it, or you can at least get a PDF if you buy...
You can buy it on its own, you can buy a PDF of it, and you can buy it with at least some pre-printed stat cards or total sheets.
Yes, and then they've also made a 2-player starter set and a couple of faction-specific starter sets.
One for each of the 4 factions.
Yes, and the 4 factions being Germans,
British, US, and Soviet.
Perfect. Yeah, feels like the World of Tanks game. That was the same. They were the 4 factions in that, because I was looking at that because the tanks are the same size as Flames of War. I didn't in the end, though, because...
I don't know whether it's in that book or whether it was said other places, but it has pretty much been confirmed that other nations and other time periods and other specific tank types will be available in supplements at later dates.
Oh, so, nice. Yeah, so this isn't like a one and done.
That's not the plan.
Yes.
It seems.
Now, to confirm, this uses your existing tanks that you might already have for bolt action. It's not a smaller scale or anything like that.
It is a 156 28mm scale game. So it is made in mind so that you can use your bolt action tanks.
Yes, which is good, because we are people who like buying tanks that we're probably never going to use otherwise.
3 Hellcats.
3 Hellcats, indeed. I blame Warlord and Rubicon, mainly.
My Hellcats were all Warlord.
Yes, but we do still blame Rubicon for making nice kits, and we keep buying them.
Blame Rubicon because I bought that Sherman, so I might have to buy an M10 to turn one of those Shermans into an M36B tank destroyer. But we'll not get into that just yet, because that's more money.
Yes, this is true. And we have spent a lot recently on a lot of different things, as you'll have seen on the channel, because I'm actually putting up videos for a change. I know. You're welcome. So, as you can see here, it shows you what you will need for this game. It shows you the basic look of a stat card, and we will go into that in more detail, one would assume, as we're flicking through the book. It shows you the tokens, and these are the tokens that you get with the starter sets. But also you can buy the tokens separately.
I don't think you can buy the tokens separately yet, but all of the tokens, the cards, the trackers, and generic unregistered data cards are all in the back to be photocopied.
Oh, right, perfect. So there is a way to get them...
without having official printed material.
Yes, perfect. As you can see here, it shows you some examples of some tanks. I've been looking at getting myself the German one because you can never have enough, German tanks.
And you actually don't own enough German tanks to play a small game either.
That is true. Yeah, that's tragic, actually. I have as many British vehicles as I do German, and obviously my German army is far bigger in size.
Well, that's the thing with bolt action, though, isn't it?
It is, yes.
You would only have a motor pool big enough to play this from a bolt action collection if you really went all in and had basically one of every option for whatever nation you're playing, or whether you're like me and you just really like American tanks and paint olive drab. So,
Yes.
far more than I will ever use, even in this game.
This is true. So, as you can see here, you've got your creating, no expense spared, creating your tank pool, platoon. And this shows you here your points value limit, your nationality, your purchasing tanks, and your acquiring crew grade stars. Sparks is going to run into that a little bit, one would assume.
So you set your points limits. They recommend 50, 75, I think.
Yes.
Maybe 100.
Yeah, so the ones here, one-off games agree with your opponent on points values. For a campaign game, a limit of 75 is suggested. And then it says see page 80 for more details. So that's probably where it's going to go into your campaign stuff.
So the way that tanks work is each of the tanks have three ratings. They either have low quality, medium quality or caliber, and high caliber.
And that's shown
And they have
here.
increasing amount of points. You buy your tank at that caliber. When it comes time to play a game or start a campaign, you roll a d6 for each of your tanks, and you look at the score you get and apply it to whatever caliber you have.
Yes.
That's how many stars you have. You then assign those stars to your crew based on the crew rating. So you could have a medium caliber tank, pay the medium points. You start a game and you roll d6 and you get 4. Which would get you 6 stars.
Yes.
So you have 6 stars to spend on your crew. Now that could mean that you have a veteran commander,
Yep.
a trained gunner, and a green driver just out of the academy.
Yep.
Or it could mean that you have a well-trained crew. No one's veteran, no one's green, everybody's a medium caliber. But it also could mean that you roll a 1 and only get 4 stars. So although you paid medium caliber, you could have just a junk-ass crew that's just been shipped out.
Yes.
You don't know until you get there. So there's a little bit of a novelty and a little bit of the swing on how good crew might be when it comes to a game. There's a lot of information in this that is blind, which could make it quite interesting.
Yes. So I'm going to slide across now, and you've got your crew rules.
Yes, it explains the crew grades a little bit better and how it works. There is another way to do one-off games, and that's by the class system, by just agreeing on like a class limit and taking tanks up to the class limit, and everybody counts as medium.
Yes.
Instead of going into the slightly more granular points. But green crew are 1 star, and any of their tests are a 4+. Trained crew is 2 star, and everyone is on a 3+. Veteran is 3 star, everything's on a 2+, and depending on what type of crew per tank is veteran, if any, they get another bonus, which I think is here, based on what they are.
Right, so I'm going to just zoom into that because that's pretty good.
Yeah, so if you have a veteran driver, anytime your tank counters hold down from long range, you get +1 to your hold down rating.
Yep.
So hold down being that if you're behind terrain, there's a certain chance that you'll hit the terrain instead of the tank.
Yes.
If you're at long range with a veteran driver, he's really good at jinking out of the way, so that percentage of hitting something other than the tank after you've fired is slightly increased at long range because he's more manoeuvrable.
Yes.
You can reroll 1s to hit, and there's the commander ones there as well.
So that one's going to be really important for me then. The rerolling 1s to hit.
Quite possibly.
Yes. I'm going to zoom back out so we can see the preparing for a battle. Now, this I'm guessing is more for... Is this for one-off games, or is this just for standard... Right, so this is... Yeah. It doesn't differ between a one-off game and a campaign.
No.
For the steps.
Yeah.
That's good.
So you apply your ID tokens to the tanks.
Yep.
And it goes A through to whatever. And those are all unique, including on your opponent's side, because some of the tokens for like spotting and targeting, you would put a token next to the tank on the battlefield with an ID next to it. So if you have a Panther which is ID A, as in this, and it targeted my M10 Wolverine,
Yes.
you would put a token, the target token marked A next to my Wolverine to know that that specific Panther has sight and is locking in.
Right,
their
I
shot
get you now.
on that specific tank.
Yes.
You have your crew tokens.
Yep.
So the way that it's supposed to be made is that your crew tokens, because they are randomly generated at the start of a campaign or at the start of every one-off game, you have your little tokens that you put on, which kind of just sit over the points.
We saw those on the token.
Because if you have some crew damage or damage to the tank later, them stars might temporarily or permanently reduce.
Oh.
So they might need to be swapped out mid-game.
Yes.
You have your smoke grenade tokens, which are effectively one-off, two-off that you can pop smoke.
Yes.
You have your ammunition tokens, because certain guns, depending on what they are, could have armor piercing, they could have HE, they could have special ammo, or they could have smoke ammo. Which is why the tactical actions come into you need to load the gun.
Right.
Because you might be loading HE, you might be loading armor penetrate, you might be loading smoke, you might be loading heavy duty special ammunition. You don't know. That comes into the granular flexibility within the game. You have your hatch token, because there is benefits and penalties to having your hatch open, whether your commander's buttoned up or not. You have your command tokens, which is these ones.
Yep. Now they look like they're movement tokens from some of the other types of games we've played.
Yes.
Are we going to cover
Yes.
how they work here, or is it later on?
Later on.
Sounds good to me.
And then you have your targeting marker, which is whether you are spotted, whether you are targeting.
Yes.
As I mentioned. And that's basically how you set up. You do that for each of your tanks, and you can start going on.
Cool. So yeah, we're looking, obviously here it's got the ammo tokens, which we mentioned, special ammunition, and that's not something we'll go into here, because it's something we can talk about more once we've played a few games and stuff. And
the special ammunition does have its own thing. So
yes.
You have a certain amount of special ammunition. Tanks can only hold 2 rounds of special ammunition, if any.
Yes.
Only certain tanks can carry special ammunition, and it depends on when you are playing, what nation you're playing, as to how many special rounds.
Right.
So early war, Germans get extra special ammunition based on the roll that they would make at the start of a game.
Yes.
Where late war, when they're running out of resources, they get significantly less. Whereas the Americans don't start with much, but by the time they start ramping up production in the late war, they get a lot more special ammunition.
Oh.
So even that's flexible based on game-to-game purposes.
And then I'll slide across. Now, just to point out, this book is gorgeously artworked. As you've seen as we're going through it, there's obviously painted models and stuff, but there's actual just artwork in it as well. And it's all... it would be period appropriate. Obviously, it's Warlord. They're very good with stuff like that. But the artwork itself is just really, really nice. You've got things like... I'll just flick back to before where you see all the detailing from the Cromwell and things like that. It's nice. I just wanted to comment on that because it was pretty. So here we've got like the important concepts.
It's measured in inches. Crew tests is how they do that. Line of sight is true line of sight from the point of the commander's hatch. Because it's your commander that's doing most of the spotting to tell people where other vehicles are and where they're doing radio checks from. Mm-hmm. Line of sight is true line of sight to any part of the tank. So if you can see a barrel poking out from behind the woods, you can attempt to spot it. You can attempt to target that tank. But unless you can see the actual hull or turret of a tank, you can't shoot it. Because there's no point trying to shoot an open barrel.
Yes.
But the open barrel, you can take spotting tests and targeting tests because there's a tank there. I just can't see it well enough to shoot it yet. But I can see it well enough to start aiming at it.
Yes.
Which is not a thing that happens in many other games. normally you ignore barrels and stuff like that.
Yes, you do.
Having a long barrel poking out from behind the woods can be a detriment in this, but also you're still safe from being shot at.
Yes.
Possibly, depending on how dense the terrain is that you're shooting through. And that is explained here.
Yep, so I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit.
Full line of sight. Can't see it all because it's through the terrain. Wouldn't be able to shoot them because you can't see the hull, but can see the barrel enough that you can start spotting and taking aim at that general location, knowing that there's a vehicle there.
And that would play into if that vehicle then moved out, you wouldn't have to aim at it before you could shoot, I would assume. Or it would be easier to aim at it.
It would be easier. You could already be aimed at it as
yes.
it's moving out from behind cover because you know it's there rather than having to make a snap fire.
Yes.
Because you don't have to aim at tanks, it's just significantly better to do it.
Yes. Ooh. So obviously here we come across the game turn, and up at the top there we've got one of my favourite vehicles, which is the Puma, which I'm guessing won't be as broken in this as it potentially is in bolt action.
Possibly.
Oh, 3rd edition's going to fix that, isn't it? I already know it.
Hopefully.
Stupid fixing my tanks so they're not broken as out. But yeah, so this is the turn phase. I'm guessing Sparks is going to run through this with me while I have a little sip of tea.
So, initiative check, initiative phase, radio checks, whether you're buttoned or unbuttoned, into your action phases, and then the admin phase, and that is a round. There is 3 action phases, so you get to make 3 movements and 3 actions in a turn, which sets up to the granularity of needing to load, needing to spot.
Yeah,
like
so if you had, say, 5 tanks or something like that, you're definitely not going to be activating and doing stuff with all of them.
No, you are.
Oh,
each
so
one can activate up to 3 times.
each one can activate up to 3 times. Perfect, that's what I was wondering.
So in the initiative phase, you draw your initiative tokens. You will have a number of initiative tokens equal to the amount of tanks that are in the game.
Yeah.
You will split them face down, unseen, between the 2 players. When you do that, you take a radio check for the highest veterancy of your commander, I believe. And if you pass that, when you draw your initiative token, you can look at it, see what number it is, and assign it to what tank you want. If you fail it, every initiative token that you draw that turn has to be assigned blind, so you don't even know what order you're assigning things to.
Oh.
So if you pass your radio check, you know that if there's 5 tanks in the game, there'll be initiative tokens 1 to 5. If you pass your radio check, you might see that you have 2, 3, and 5.
Yeah.
So you know that your 3 tanks are going to be activating 2nd and 3rd and 5th in the turn. You don't know which one of your opponents is going to be activating first and which one's going to be 4th. And you'll be able to assign which ones you want to activate 2nd, 3rd, and 5th.
Yes.
However, if you fail it, you get 3 tokens, you put them down, and you don't know when anybody's going because the lines of communication have been lost, and it's just a free-for-all for that round.
I feel like I'm going to be playing a lot of the game like that because we all know what I'm like with any kind of important test.
Mm-hmm.
It's break tests all over again.
But you assign that at the start of a phase, start of a round, and then you go into the activation phases, and then you do 3 action phases, one after the other, where you activate each tank in their initiative order. Once everyone's done their actions, you go back to the 2nd activation phase, you do the 3, and then they get to activate again before you move to admin.
Slide across. So
explaining the radio checks.
Yep.
And where you do things. Or also in the initiative phase, you choose whether you want to be buttoned or unbuttoned. If your commander is unbuttoned, there is a chance a sniper or a stray round might take his head off, but it makes it a lot easier to spot tanks and issue orders because he's got his head out the cupola, basically issuing orders on the radio.
All right, so action phase. Yep. Now, this is one of the dashboards that you would need, I believe.
Yes. So it's got your 3 actions in a thing, and then your turn counters top and bottom. Turns in this are quite rounds in this, and time and mission timings is quite odd but interesting. But yeah, so you would use a token on these 3 parts to show whether you're in action phase 1, 2, or 3 to show the progression of the round. When you do the first round, you flip all your initiative tokens over to show everyone who's doing it.
Yep.
In what order. And then you issue commands. you place your command tokens face down on the tanks, and these are your command tokens.
Yep.
So basically, at the start of an action phase, you assign each of your tanks whether they're going to move forward, move back, turn right, turn left, or stay still. So you get 3 movements and 3 sets of actions each turn. But you have to pre-plan your movement. But unlike, say, what's the Star Wars game? Armada. Where you sometimes have to plan 3 or 4 turns in advance. You effectively do it phase in advance.
Yes.
So you flip your tokens over, you know you're activating 2nd, 3rd and 5th, and you need this specific tank to go down that road, and nothing's going to be in line of sight.
Yeah.
So face down, you put a forward order, knowing that you're probably going to go forward. But if it's getting to a point where things might get a bit janky and you need to move through terrain, you might choose to halt or turn left or turn right.
Yes.
But you don't. You play it face down, not to telegraph it to your opponent.
Makes sense.
And you only reveal them as that specific tank activates. Each action phase, you get a movement action, which is based by your commands, and a tactical action. Tactical actions are not done in advance. They are done phase by phase.
Yes.
So if it turns out that you put a forward and your opponent put a halt, and by the time you move forward you can't say anything,
Yep.
you're not wasting an action by planning to spot.
Yes.
But if you put a turn right and your opponent moves into a position that when you turn right you can now see them, you can then choose to start spotting or make a snap fire.
Yeah.
Other things that happen, so when it comes to movement actions, things like tactical actions are spotting, targeting, shooting, making close assaults, clearing terrain, and pivots and scoots for extra movement and extra turning.
Yeah.
Whenever you make a move action other than a halt, you can test your driver's skill to make a free pivot.
Yeah.
So a forward action doesn't necessarily mean directly forward and directly forward only.
Yes.
You might get 1 or 2 pivots, depending on whether you spend your tactical action to pivot and whether your driver's skilled enough to realise we need to do that now.
Right, yeah.
And then you get to the admin phase after you've done all your actions.
So we'll have a quick gander of that.
So you remove your initiative markers, you discard or replenish any event cards. Event cards are a thing as well.
Yep.
Roll for time elapsed. So you'll probably get into this later in the book, but right now, these numbers on the top of the marker here, you've got 10s and you've got units here.
Yep.
The way turns work in this is that there is as many rounds as you have time for a mission. Each mission will have a time limit, say 30 minutes.
Yes.
When you get to the admin phase, you roll for time elapsed. It alternates who rolls depending on the scenario, and whoever rolls for time elapsed chooses to roll 1d6 or 2d6. Whatever the total is, you add to that tracker. So if you roll 2d6 and the total was an 8, you'd move the marker to 8. You are now 8 minutes into that mission. If the next player decides to roll 1 dice and only rolls a 1,
You're now
9 minutes into the mission. But if they choose to roll 2 dice again and roll a 12, you're now 20 minutes into the mission. So after 2 rounds, 2 people rolling, you're 2/3 of the way through the game.
So you move across the bottom, and then for every 10 it goes up, back up. So that's really interesting. It's
and
like
missions sometimes have reserves that have to come on, but reserves come on in waves depending on how far into the mission it is. So depending on how you've rolled for time elapsed, or how you choose to try and rush the game or shorten the game, it might be that your second wave of reinforcements turn up in turn 2. It might be that your second wave of first wave of reinforcements don't turn up till turn 4. It's all dependent on how much time the mission has taken.
all right. So movement, we've covered that somewhat. Is it worth going into a huge chunk with this book, or is that better to wait until we're actually getting models on the table for that? Because that's one good thing, is we actually have most of our tanks painted, at least for my Germans and your Americans.
I think I've got to paint tracks on 2 tanks to get enough to put on a table for a game.
I just have to paint 1 Panzer 4.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then I'm good to go. So we can actually do games for this
Fairly soon.
fairly soon. And scenery we've got loads of because we've painted up most of our bolt action scenery.
But yeah, movement, you do your actions. If you move forward, you can move up to your speed, depending on the tank.
Yep.
You move back, it's up to 4 inches, I believe, in a reverse. Up to 4 inches.
Yep.
Turn left, turn right. You can move up to 4 inches and make a 90-degree turn either before or after moving. And halt is stay where you are.
Perfect. That was what I was going to ask before, actually, when you were talking about right and left turns. Is it just a turn or do you get to move? So
It's a move including a 90-degree turn.
and you can do it at the start or the end, so it's not in between at any point. Perfect.
But even that doesn't cover it because there's the pivot as well.
Yes, of
so
course.
You might get more movement, more turn, and ever so slightly more turn, either before, after, or at the same time as when you turn. So you could pivot, move, and then turn, or turn, move, and then pivot, or you could roll for your command driver and be able to pivot, move, turn, and then pivot a bit more with your action.
So much pivoting. Oh, I love pivoting. So now we've come on to tactical actions. Now, tactical actions we've covered very briefly thus far.
So tactical actions are your main actions after movement. So you can pivot, you can scoot, you can pop smoke, you can machine gun an enemy tank, you can clear ambush terrain, which is a thing. You can load the main gun, you can unload the main gun, you can spot a target, aim at a target, or fire the main gun. So starting with the pivot.
Yep.
Pivot, you might be able to get a free pivot based on a driver test.
Yep.
But you can also take it as one of your tactical actions. The way you pivot is you take your tank, as shown here, and you turn it from the very centre of the back of the model, and you turn it between the tracks. So you place your finger on one track with the centre there, and then you turn it so that the other track's next to your finger.
I'll just zoom in a bit so people can see that.
So if you were pivoting to the right, you would place your finger here. You would pivot on this point till that side of the track. That side's tracks were on there. And that's the distance you can pivot.
Ah, that's really simple. And it stops people arguing about, was that 90 degrees? Was that 25 degrees?
Your pivot is based on how big and how wide the tank is.
Yes.
The bigger and wider it is, the more it can pivot, but the more cumbersome it is to do.
Yes. So we're going across to scoot next.
Scoot is exactly what it is. You scoot a bit.
Yes.
So you roll 2d6. And if you want to scoot forward, you pick the higher. If you want to scoot backwards, you pick the lower. Simple as that.
An
example there,
yes.
roll 2d6. If you were choosing, before rolling, you would choose whether you want to scoot forward
Oh,
or
so
back.
you choose at that point.
Yep. I want to scoot backwards, so you would roll 2d6, and whatever the lower result was, that's how far back you go. So if you roll a 6 and a 4, you would scoot back 4 inches.
Yes.
If you roll a 6 and a 1, you would only scoot back 1.
So sliding across. So we've done scoot. We are now looking at pop smoke.
Yep. So if you've got smoke grenades, you can pop smoke and make it harder to see. So that's more to do with smoke rounds, smoke grenades. I haven't had a proper look at that yet. I think that's one of the things I glossed over because it's in a side call out rather than the main rules, and I was trying to learn how main things work first.
I mean, in terms of this, this is it's more in depth than we normally go into in the rulebook because we're really excited for this game, which is why we're spending a lot more time on it. We kind of hope it takes off in a pretty big way, especially to give us some more factions and things like that. So we will cover more things like this when we're actually playing. Yeah. But yeah, so that's absolutely fine on that. So
another action you can do is you can machine gun the enemy tank, which either puts some light damage on or could force the commander to button up or reduce the commander's command level by basically injuring them.
Yes.
So that's a way to do close assault. You can clear area terrain, ambush terrain. So terrain in this is either dedicated as rough, the normal ones, but things like woods or ruins can be designated at the start of the game as ambush terrain. The way ambush terrain works is if you move into it, you might get ambushed. So you might take some damage to your wheels or to your hull. Event cards and asset cards, which are covered later on in the book, is how you get infantry in this game. There is no infantry in this game other than if you're playing campaigns and you bail out of a damaged tank to try and save your crew.
Yes, because I've noticed some of the starter sets come with the odd, really cool looking model, actually.
Come with the tank crew set.
Yes.
Yeah. So, ambush terrain, things like asset cards. Some asset cards are things like anti-tank teams. So it might be a bazooka team hiding in the wood, and you can play that as a gotcha. When you get 6 inches close to a piece of ambush terrain,
Yes.
you can clear the ambush terrain to say there was a bazooka team hiding in there, and they're going to take a shot at you. If you don't want that to happen, you have to clear ambush terrain. And the way you can do that is either with close order fire, with machine guns or flamethrowers, or by loading your main gun with high explosives.
Ooh.
And then there's roles in doing that. If you, depending on whether you're using the HE shell or close assault fire or flamethrowers,
Yes.
depends on the score. But effectively, it's you roll a certain number of dice depending on what weapons you're using and what stats you need to do it. And it's a 6, I believe, or 5 or 6 for a flamethrower. You clear the terrain and you just flip the token over from ambush terrain to cleared.
Yes.
There might be events that make that terrain no longer cleared, but for the most part, you've made that area of the battlefield fairly safe.
Yes. Oh, slide across. This is the big one.
Yeah. Loading the main gun. So when you load the main gun, you take an action.
Yep.
And you choose what type of shell you want to start loading into the main gun. If it's a light gun, it loads. If it's a small shell, just stick it in the gun.
Yeah.
If it's a medium or heavy or very heavy, I think it's called, gun, it moves into the load bay and a second action will make it ready.
Right.
If it's a medium or a heavy gun, but not the heaviest,
yeah.
You can force a load, which point your crew, your gunner, can take a skill check based on his rating.
Yes.
If you pass, it skips the loading bay and goes straight to ready. If you fail, it depends. So if you fail on a medium gun, it goes into the loading bay. If you fail on a heavy gun, it goes back to the ammunition rack and you lose that action.
Oh, wow.
Because the shell is too big and you've fumbled it too much and you've slowed yourself down even more rather than speeding to rush it up. If at some point you have started to load the wrong thing, started loading HE to clear terrain and then a tank pops its head round, you can spend a tactical action to unload the gun to put the right shell in.
Does that work the same but in reverse? Or?
No, you just take the shell out.
Right.
And then you have to start loading the gun.
Yes. So if you're loading sort of a medium round in, it's not. You might as well do the skill check because worst case scenario, you're going to be in the same position.
There are calamities if you roll a 1.
Oh, right. That was what I was curious about. If there was any way that was... So it's not always advisable.
Not always advisable, but...
Especially if you're using maybe a green crew or something like that, where they're more likely to fail.
They're more likely to fail, but everyone's as likely as
because
anybody
it's a
else
1
to do a calamity.
Yes. So now...
So, first over on the first page...
Oh, did I miss something?
Before you get aim target.
Oh, sorry.
Spot target.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
So if your commander from the cupola, either buttoned or unbuttoned, can see any part of a tank, including the barrel, you can start the spot. So prerequisites: perform the action, place your tank spotted marker. So
which is the one we looked at before, yeah.
Marker there. If you are unbuttoned, you can take a test, and if you succeed, you don't use an action to spot. So that's a reason for having your commander with his head out the top.
Ah.
So you take a test, and if you try to spot, you can effectively get it for free.
Is there any calamities or anything with that, or other than the fact that your commander could get shot in the head?
I'll have to double check. I don't think so because there's nothing marked there.
Yes.
Normally, if there's a calamity, it will mention it.
Yes.
So once you have spotted, you can then aim.
Yes.
If you spot a target, you can shoot it. If you aim at a target, you can shoot at it with a higher dice pool.
Ooh.
So that's the way that this works. You have 2 different dice pools for spotted and aimed. And if you have neither, you can snap fire, but it's ill-advised. Once you've done the spotting, you can then aim. If you aim, you flip it over to the other side with a different symbol.
Yes.
And that just means that if it moves out of terrain into a position where you can't see it, you'll lose the marker.
So once you're marked, you're not always marked. You can get rid of that.
Yeah, by getting completely out of line of sight of the specific marked ones.
Yes.
And then you've got your main gun.
This feels like it might be important.
Yeah. So once your gun's loaded, once you've spotted or targeted, you can shoot. So you would move your ammo back into your ammunition rack
Yep.
to say you've done it.
So you don't lose those ammunition.
Unless it's special, because they're limited.
Yes.
And then you roll for hit location, and roll for damage. So snap fire. I'm upside down here, so I need to double check how this works.
You may still perform a fire gun action against an enemy tank, even if you do not have a targeting marker on it. Spotted or aimed side up. This is called a snap fire. It's a last-minute panic measure, and the chance of hitting is small. You may also be required to take a snap fire shot if instructed to do so by the rules. See machine guns below. When taking a snap fire shot, instead of using one of your dice to roll values on your tank's data card, you always roll 2d6. If both of these dice equal or exceed the score needed to hit, that round is struck and the target, otherwise the shot misses. And if the round hits, follow the procedures on page 40 to page 47 on hit locations and damage is normal.
So the way you normally hit is you check your gun. Each gun will have a targeting
Yep, got it.
dice roll, and spotted, and a targeting dice roll. You would roll that many dice, depending on if you'd spotted them or targeted them. And the score you would need is based on your short or long range of that specific gun.
Right.
If you are snap firing, it doesn't matter what these values are. You roll 2 dice. You need that to hit. And to get a hit, you need both of them to hit. Normally it's only one.
And so all this information is just on your normal stat card, isn't it?
If you have pre-printed ones or written out ones, because these are your stats for your tanks, they're the stats for your guns.
Perfect.
And they're blank stats.
So if you have no access to a printer, for instance, you could jot something down on paper and all the stats are in the book.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, so like I say, you've got the amount of dice you roll, what you need to hit, roll the hit, and if you succeed, you get it. Veteran gunners, 3-star gunners, get reroll ones.
Nice.
Hit location. Once you have hit, you roll d6.
Yep.
On a 1, you hit the running gear. 2 to 4, you hit the hull. 5 to 6, you hit the turret.
Yes.
Simple as that. If you are hull down, so you're partially obscured by terrain, you have the hull down penalty. So a Panther A is hull down 3.
Yes.
If, after checking for defense and stuff like that, terrain and stuff like that, you are classed as hull down, any roll to determine the hit location of a 3 or less misses. It hits the terrain. So effectively you can never hit the running gear, and you're more likely to hit the turret.
Yes.
But it's effectively against a Panther that's hull down. It's a 50-50 chance of whether you actually hit anything. Veteran drivers at long range get +1 to hull down. If you have a halt marker, so a halt marker means that you're not making any moves. If you have any order other than a halt, you have moved, in inverted commas, even if you don't move any distance. If you are halted, your shots can be more accurate. I think you lose a die for moving and shooting.
Yeah.
I have to double check that. But if you are halted, you can target a specific location, which point you do the similar thing to the scoot. You roll 2d6 for your hit location.
Yeah.
But before you roll, you choose whether you're aiming high or aiming low. You then roll 2d6, and if you chose aiming low, you pick the lowest result. Aiming high, you pick the highest result. So if a target is hull down and you're making a targeted shot, you aim high, you roll 2d6 and pick the highest result. Because you're aiming above the terrain, so you're more likely to hit the top. If you're trying to stop someone moving to get into a better position to kill it outright, you might aim low, roll 2d6, hoping for a 1 to try and take out the running gear.
I like that. I like that. And then again, some more beautiful artwork.
Mm-hmm. And then damaging the target works very similar to a lot of other games. you have a load of armour values, but simply it's the front and side of the turret, the front and side of the hull, the running gear, and the engine deck.
Yes.
You are either in the front arc or the side arc. There's no back arc.
Yes, I know.
90 degree to the front or everything's the side. Your running gear is your tracks, wheels, whatever it is, and the engine deck is only matted for certain things like artillery strikes.
Yes.
When you do that, you roll your d6, add on the penetration value of your weapon.
Yep.
If there's 2 with an 11 in red in brackets afterwards, that's for special ammo. Your limited ammo, and you compare it to whatever the armor value is. If the total is less than the armor value, nothing happens. If you roll equal to or higher, you get a damaging hit, and if you if you're equal to, you get a damaging hit, and if you're greater than, you get a damaging hit and penetration.
Right.
If the damaging hit, you put a token on. If you get 2 tokens on the same place, you're out of action. There's rules for glancing hits as well. Oh, if you roll a 1, doesn't matter how well you do, you never get the penetration value.
Right.
But on a penetration hit, so if you roll, depending on how high you are, so if you've got like an armor of 6 to a penetration value of 8 and you roll a 6,
yeah,
14 to 6, you are 4 higher on the penetration value, you just kill it outright. So there is a chance to kill things outright, but there's also chances to stack damage.
Yes.
Effects of tokens. So hull and turret damage, they take the first hit. It's the second one, then they go out of action because you have blown the turret off or you've blown the engine out or something like that.
Yes.
Running gears can have 2 tokens, but if it takes a third, it's dead. If at any point a tank has 3 damage tokens, so it could be 1 on the hull, 1 on the turret, and 1 on the running gear, it's out of action. It's just got too much damage across the entire thing.
Yes.
So it counts as out of action. Doing too much damage to the running gear cripples it, but doesn't necessarily kill it outright.
So is that the instance where it can still fire its turrets and things, but it can't move?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you do too many damage tokens to it, like put 3 running gear damage onto it, you've crippled it to the point where it's kind of like blown off the tracks and sunk it down to the point where its turret can't traverse properly.
Yeah.
So those are the ways to do it. There is also additional effects when a tank is damaged to its hull or its turret and isn't knocked out. It's still operational. Yeah, so every time you damage a tank but don't kill it, you roll a d6, and on a 3+, you roll on this table. So 1 to shaken, there's no more harm done. On a 3 to 4, you roll on another table, which might have an effect, which could reduce the star rating of your commander. Reduce the star commander by 2. Gunner loses 1 to star, or you could damage some of the hardware.
Right.
So there is some effective ongoing damage if you don't kill a tank outright.
Yes.
There's lots of little bits and pieces in there.
Like we said, it gets very granular. Which is why 50 to 75 sounds like it's probably going to be a bit of the sweet spot for this.
50, I think, is around about 3 tanks size.
Yes. I know when we were looking at it, I think, was it 3 tanks for me and the same for you? Yeah.
Or 2 tanks in an armoured car or a scout vehicle.
Yes.
There's also rules for brewing up. Brewing up, so if you take a certain amount of damage, there's a chance that the ammo will go up in flames and kill it outright anyway.
Yep.
And if you are playing campaign games, crippled or destroyed tanks but not catastrophically destroyed, you can bail your crew out, and if you can get them to safety, so you don't have to have a new crew for the campaign. You can keep their experience.
I get you there.
Button up, there are effects if the tank commander is unbuttoned and things happen to him. There's a chance that he's fine, or he might be wounded and take some damage, or he might just be shaken and forced to button up, and you're not allowed to open the hatch for the rest of the game because he's too busy keeping his head down.
Yes.
But there's a number of effects there. So you get your bonuses to spotting for having your head out the cupola, but there's also some bad things.
Yes.
And it talks about terrain. You've got your standard rough terrain. We've got the ambush terrain that we've talked about before.
Yep.
Passable terrain. The restriction of movement and things. There is a whole double page spread on Bocage because it's basically linear obstacles and rough terrain and ambush terrain, and there's weird ways how that works. So it's this whole thing. We don't have any Bocage in our terrain sets at the moment, so it's less of an issue for us.
Yes.
But
it's something we want though at some point.
Tank traps, strong points, and prepared positions. So some scenarios allow you to prepare a position to dig in a tank.
Yes.
They can move out of that position. There's lots of good things for being in a prepared position, but you're effectively mobile until you choose to move out of it. If you move out of it, you're no longer dug in. You work like a normal tank and you lose the position.
Gives me a reason to buy those ones for the Japanese when we start to get the rules for them.
And then there's a few traits. So things like cumbersome. If you've got a really, really, really big gun, you can only fire it when you're halted because the recoil's too much. Some tanks have flamethrowers, which help you clear your ambush terrain or make close assaults. Some things have all around, so they don't have a turret, but they can shoot in all directions. Things like an M20 scout car.
Yes.
The Pintle HMG. Some things are half track. Some things are open topped, which have different effects. Take more damage from certain assets like airstrikes and stuff that might hit them from above. Pintle, which helps with close order. If a tank has Pintle and your commander is unbuttoned, you get better close order tests because he's shooting the 50 cal or whatever. Rear guns, some things have guns on the back. Shirts in makes you more resistant to ambushes.
Yes.
Basically, it's a lot harder to hit you in the side armor with a bazooka when you've got spaced armor. So you're less likely to take damage from things like that.
Yep. My Stug knows all about that.
Support are very specific tanks, so that's more of a limiting factor, so you can't just take an entire platoon of support tanks because that just doesn't happen.
Yes.
American stabilizers, where they don't suffer the penalty for moving and firing if they make a forward move, but they still do if they turn.
Yes.
Wheeled, which is restrictive for terrain purposes, for getting into ambush terrain. Turretless for things like the Marder, where it's got a gun on top of a platform with a bit of traversal, but it doesn't actually have a turret, so it can't follow the turret rules.
Yes.
Basically, it just puts in the rules so that if you hit the turret, you hit the hull, and there's other things. And Scout, so you take things like your Scout tanks and your Scout cars.
Why do those hay bales look like ours a bit? It's not relevant to this, but we now maybe have hay bales for bolt action as well.
And then Scout, so things like your 222 armoured cars and your M20s, your M8 Greyhounds. Certain Stuarts are Scouts and can spot 4 other tanks. If they spot a tank, then everyone counts as spotted. So you can kind of jump things up, but they tend to be lighter, but they have a specific role in the platoon. And the final thing about the game is the cards. So you have 2 types of cards. You have event cards and you have asset cards. Event cards are a shared 52 card deck between the players, and they are refreshed and shuffled and discarded and redrawn every round.
And so you'd only need one between two for that.
Yeah. And the other one is asset cards, which are effectively nation specific.
Yes.
But they're limited, and you only get a certain amount of them, and once you spend them, they're done.
Yes.
So the amount of cards you have is, and your hand limit is, dependent on the amount of tanks total on both sides.
Right.
So you're not getting penalised for only having 2 big heavy tanks against a swarm of scout vehicles.
So
because the amount of event cards you get is based on the total.
So most 50-point games, you're going to be getting 3 or 4 cards. More than likely 4 cards.
Most games you're going to be getting 4 cards.
Yeah.
4 or more. Because it's 3, 6 is 4.
Yes.
And that's your hand limit. So you can discard and draw up a certain amount depending on your commander skill levels. But you can never draw above the hand limit of what you started with.
Yes.
They have their stats. They have an effect when you play them. Some of them are reactions, so you can use it to cancel other cards.
Right, yeah.
And some of them have a crew. Each crew can only be affected by 1 tactic per turn. So if you have 2 cards in your hand that can affect a driver, they have to affect 2 different tanks, or you can't play them on the same turn. Because he's too busy doing the effect of the first one.
To do another one, yeah.
Asset cards, again, you get a random amount based on the total number of tanks. So you could go into it with 3 to 6 tanks total. So 3 tanks aside. One person gets 2 asset cards and the other one gets 7.
So that D6 plus 1 is per side.
Mm-hmm. That's how many stars they get.
Yeah.
And you spend stars on your asset cards.
I know.
So your asset cards have stars, and some of them are like 5 stars. So it could be that both people end up with 7 stars, but one person has 2 cards and another person has 7.
Yes.
Depending on the stars that they have. Asset cards can only be played if they are readied, and they can only be readied by having reinforcements played by the event deck.
So there's an event deck reinforcement.
Which allows you to ready an asset to then use it.
Ah.
Asset cards, you know how many stars your opponent has by rolling at the start of the game.
Yes.
But you don't know what cards they've bought, because they remain face down until they are played.
Ah.
Even when they are readied. So you draw a reinforcement, you ready your asset's readied face down. So you know your opponent has something they can play as a gotcha.
But you don't know what it is. Yeah, so
until they play it.
It's going to be hard to plan for it unless you're really familiar with their deck.
But even then, it might be depending on the mission. You might think that they're going to use an airstrike to take out your tiger, but for this mission, you might have placed a minefield instead because they want to slow you down.
Yes. See, that's really...
And you can't rely on always having the same 2 or 3 cards every game, because you roll randomly for how many stars you can spend on asset cards every game. So you can't basically rely on using the same cards over and over and over and over and over.
So it's the same in campaigns. You don't like buy certain cards throughout the campaign. You'd still roll per game.
I believe so, yes.
Cool.
And then some of them are attacks like anti-tank guns and airstrikes. Some of them are snipers. Some of them you can ready ambush positions. Some of them are close assaults, so it might be a squad of guys running out with their gammon bombs out of the woods.
Yeah.
Or hand grenades. There's a few different things that the assets do. Some of them are the same card reflavoured across the nations, and some of them are slightly unique. But I think every nation has 10 cards at the moment of different star values.
Yeah.
But a lot of those cards either require line of sight or come from ambush terrain, which is why you want to clear ambush terrain.
Yes.
To stop some of the asset cards from taking effect.
That makes sense.
And from there you have your missions. There's 6 missions in the core rulebook, and again, it's shown. You've got your base hedges, you've got your sides, where your reserves might come on from for each player, and then victory conditions, when reserves come on, and scenario. So you've got your board edges, rough terrain thing, how far you come on. You've got your setup. Game duration is 35 minutes. So when you randomise at the end, when you're rolling for time elapsed, when the total gets to 35 or higher, game ends. Reinforcements, if you choose to use your reinforcements, because it's optional, not mandatory. So up to half of your guys could be reinforcements, but none are mandatory.
Yep.
You would choose to have them in stage 1 or stage 2. Stage 1 you can bring in after 10 minutes. Stage 2 you can bring in after 20 minutes of the time elapsed. And then VPs for whatever the VP is. So the scenarios are really easily set out.
Yes.
There's nothing too over the top once you get your head around the game duration.
Yes.
From there you've got your 6 scenarios in the core book. Some other options for you, such as capture tanks if you're playing campaigns, or if you want to play in fog or snow or at night. Lovely bit of, I believe it's Peter Deck's artwork still.
I think so, yeah.
And then it goes into the campaigns, which I haven't had a good chance to look at yet, because we'll be playing one-off games to get the rules in before we start.
I definitely think, I mean, we're coming up on nearly an hour. So I think if we do the campaign, we'll probably cover that as a separate section and a separate video, because by that point we'll have played a couple of games and a lot of it will make more sense to us. But yeah, we're definitely going to check out Here we've got obviously your platoon
Your
roster.
for campaigns, blank cards for you to fill out for tanks.
Yep.
You've got print and play copies of all of the cards for your nation assets, and then your event card for between players. So they're all there. Copies of all the tokens that you would need if you want to photocopy and print these out if you don't have the official ones. Your British tank rules, your German tank rules, US, Soviets.
Yep.
Good selection of things. So from the Americans, you've got everything from an M20 Scout car to a Sherman Crocodile to an E77 flamethrower tank. There's an M26 Persian there, the Jumbo's there, every version of Sherman from
You're mainly just listing
42
tanks
onwards.
you own because you own all.
I don't have this. I don't have a Crocodile.
Do you? Oh no, you have crocodiles for
Flames of War.
Flames of War. That's what I was thinking of. Ooh, I wonder if you could scale this.
But with German, a bit of work you probably could.
It feels like a lot of work. I'll just buy bigger tanks.
Yes.
You've convinced me,
You've
Warlord.
got Jagdpanzer 4s, you've got 222 armoured cars, there's the Puma, broken, getting banned. I don't know if it's broken in this, but I'm saying it is anyway, because, you know.
It's fair. It's fair.
Stug 3, various Panzer 4s, Panthers, Tigers, Tiger 2s. And then the stat lines for the guns, because they're printed on a separate page just for that. But if you have the actual printed cards, it's all cards for each tank anyway. And then
Decent little quick reference.
yeah, 1-page crypt reference and a 1-page glossary.
Can't argue with that. So, like I said, anybody who watches our channel knows we're fairly obsessed with bolt action. And we like tanks, which is why we went on to Flames of War mainly, was because we wanted more tanks. It turned out we actually liked using the infantry and stuff as well, but that was sheer coincidence. We just wanted to field a lot more tanks. This gives us the option to do that. It means we get to put out some tanks that we probably wouldn't usually get or usually play with, like yourself, who owns multiple of similar tanks. But in most of your bolt action lists, you can take one, maybe two in it if it's a specialised.
Yeah.
Or it's the actual tank platoons where you've got, you know, your 3 tanks and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a game we're going to get a bit more invested. That's the words that come out of my mouth hole. Mainly just so we can use our pretty tanks. And as I said, we kind of set ourselves a goal that we were only going to play games with painted miniatures. And since then, we haven't really played any games. It's like the two are related somehow. Because we jump from project to project. So we'll get like half of something painted. And then we'll move on to a different game and paint half of that. Except Marvel. Marvel's the only thing where we have a profuse amount of painted stuff. Bolt action, however, we have a lot of bolt action painted, especially tanks. I went from hating painting tanks to it's my favourite thing to paint in bolt action. I realised I just hate painting 40k tanks. I like painting real world tanks. It's fun, it's easy, you can get good results really quickly with some washes and some oils and some weathering powders and things. So it's definitely a game we're going to cover more. I think the next video we'll probably do on it will be running probably a very small game. Just to go through, this is how a turn works. This is how...
Maybe chuck 50 points on.
Yes.
A tank and a scout vehicle aside. Medium caliber. Probably get enough down on the table to get the rules down.
Yeah. The only thing we didn't really cover, and I'm guessing it mentions it per mission, but is it played on the same size table for every mission?
I forgot to double check that.
So we'll have a quick check of that. Just while I was here, I was thinking about it. So because they all look rectangular, meaning you're most likely going to be playing on 4x6s.
Playing area missions designed for 6x4.
Yeah, I figured that would be the case. But yeah, guys, I'm going to leave it at that because it's been an hour-long video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Anybody who was on the fence about getting the rules, we covered them pretty extensively. Pick it up. The rulebook itself wasn't overly expensive. Can you recall how much it is about?
I got a third party and it cost me 20, I think.
That's not bad.
I think it's 25 direct from Warlord.
It was like Wayland or something like that, wasn't it? You got it from,
yes.
I believe. But yeah, you'll be able to pick it up in all your usuals, Wayland, Firestorm Games, probably Goblin Game. Zatu will no doubt have it. I know they've got some of the starter sets up already. It's already up on Amazon. Where possible, though, if you're going to be ordering other stuff, snag it from Warlord. They always send you out free stuff, free sprue here or there, or free things. If you're buying a lot and it negates the postage, it's worth doing. But otherwise, there's loads of places you can pick it up. We're definitely going to cover it more. The usual, guys. Check our social medias, likes, shares. I don't know, your grandma might be into World War II stuff. I don't know. My grandma isn't. She's dead. I didn't do it, I swear. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Social media, business, links, descriptions, other videos. This has been a long one. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Pray to the dice gods and hope to smile upon you. Say goodbye, Sparks.
Bye, Sparks.
Bye, Sparks.